Yama, everyone. Welcome to the State Library of New South Wales online programs and to this very special edition of Talking Deadly, hosted by Travis de Vries with Jason Wing. My name is Marika and I'm a Gamilaroi woman and a member of the library's Indigenous engagement team. I'd like to begin this evening by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the unceded land on which I am privileged to work and live, the Dharawal people, as well as the traditional custodians of the lands from which viewers join us, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and I extend that respect to First Nations viewers who join us this evening also. If you're joining us for the first time, you're joining us right at the end of what has been an amazing series. Talking Deadly is a speaker series usually held at the library, now held online for the first time as a special series hosted by Gamilaroi artist, podcaster, writer and producer, Travis de Vries. Each fortnight for the past 2 months, Travis has been having some really great conversations with First Nations artists whose work has responded to the legacy and 250th anniversary of Captain Cook's arrival in Kamay. The series coincides with the library's 8 Days in Kamay exhibition and Bulmali Aboriginal Art Gallery's Not Young or Free exhibition. Tonight, Travis is joined by artist and activist Jason Wing, and a very warm welcome to the both of you.
Thanks, Marika.
Thanks, Marika. Hi, Jason.
Hi, Travis.
Hi, everyone. Hi, internet audience. Thank you so much for joining us for this final in the series of Talking Deadly. As Marika mentioned, we have Jason Wing here. I feel I just need to kind of go out and sort of say, like, I feel super privileged to be able to have this conversation tonight. Jason's someone in the industry that I've really looked up to for quite a few years. And as a younger artist, I was kind of, I guess, like following Jason's work and kind of taking what I could from it, and making those sort of like taking on what I could from it. Shall I read a bit of? I've got a little bit of a bio here. Shall I read a bit?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Jason began as a street artist and has since expanded his practice to incorporate photo media, installation and painting. Influenced by his bicultural upbringing, Jason explores ongoing challenges that impact his wider community, calling into question our understanding of history and our current socio-political reality. Wing repurposes everyday objects and imagery, creating works that are both visually confronting and deceptively simple. I really, really love that. You've had a already very kind of broad and varied and amazing career of exhibitions and moments, one of which, if we can jump back to 2012, was winning the Parliament Art Prize, the New South Wales Aboriginal Art Prize, run by the Parliament of New South Wales, with, it's described here as the provocative work, Australia was stolen by armed robbery. But then we're going to jump forward in time to your more recent work, Captain James Crook, Black Light, which is part of the State Library of New South Wales' current exhibition, 8 Days in Kamay. So we're going to speak about that work in particular. We might touch on that older work and touch on sort of a broader body of work of Jason's. I have, like always, a little bit of a PowerPoint, so I might bring that up and share the screen. We have someone who every time jumps in the Q&A box and says to me to make the screen a slideshow. So I'll wait for them before I make it a slideshow, and I'll share now. Jason, who's your mob? Just to kick off.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a descendant of the Biripi mob. My great-grandma is Irma Mine Walker, affectionately known as Ermi. even my grandparents were members of the stolen generation, even just recently. Yeah, so around the Taree wider region. Yeah, so that's, descendant of. I didn't grow up with mob. I born and raised on Gadigal and land. So wasn't raised with mob, but equally as authentic.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I'm a Kamilaroi man. I wasn't necessarily raised on country at all times, but I think we're, I really like to say, like, even though we might be standing on concrete, we're still standing on country.
Yeah, well, I wish I had the privilege of having unlimited records of my Aboriginal family. It's such a privilege that some families can have that access. I'm envious. But we can always, build upon what we know and make extra connections. And, as Aboriginal people, we all have a voice. So, yeah.
Yeah, and keep taking those moments where we can to gather the knowledge that we can gather, because some of it is gone. Should we jump in and talk about Captain James Crook? If it's okay, is it all right if I jump to this slide?
Yeah, I'll follow your lead, Travis.
Awesome. So, like, you describe this work, and I think this touches back to what I read from your bio with the visually confronting but deceptively simple. But you describe this work as an invitation for audiences to take an active role in how they engage with the dual histories present in this country. Just as a base description of this work, you have the image of Captain James Cook on a bust, and then when you shine the black light on it, up comes the balaclava. I mean, that it is visually confronting and deceptively simple, but there's so much going on here, and I think these things that are deceptively simple, they take a really long time to arrive at. So could you talk to me about your thought process around getting to this point, but also some of the deeper meaning behind this?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, personally, I don't find the work confronting myself. I feel like the truth is very confronting. And, I guess kind of the way my brain's wired, it's coming to a visual solution is not always the same every time, but the way that my kinesthetic brain's wired, I do enjoy the challenge of distilling complex issues that can be unpacked, but then relies on the audience member to sort of make up the third component. And yeah, I guess I'm building upon the dominant colonial narratives of Australia, and yeah, I just want to reflect an Aboriginal perspective essentially. And whilst people call it confronting, it's really the truth, and that is scary and very confronting.
Yeah, I guess I personally don't find it confronting either. I'm going to take this glass off. I don't find it confronting either, but certain sides of the public, I'm sure will.
Sure.
Because of the light that it holds up against their ideologies.
Yeah, well, I guess, I mean, there's kind of two categories. I think those people that are confronted, they're probably benefiting off colonization. So I guess that would be confronting from them to have to think to change or to contribute back to the community.
Yeah, it would be interesting to think around the mental gymnastics that people would have to go through to kind of go, this is...
Yeah, sure. But think of the mental gymnastics that we as Aboriginal people have had to go through since 1770. I mean, that's the real survivors. That's the real adaptation. And it doesn't really seem to be getting any better with our current Prime Minister saying things like slavery wasn't the foundation of Australia. And then, PC backtracking, you should never mention no slavery in Aboriginal and foundation of this country. You should never mention those words together, because that is the truth.
Yeah,
And
the balaclava over his own eyes and just choosing not to see certain realities.
yeah, well, I mean, Australia wasn't peacefully colonized. It wasn't settled. It wasn't occupied. It was invaded by lethal military force, and the Guigal Shield is evidence of that. And I don't really see any difference to the colonial intent from before they set foot on this land. Like the Welcome to Country by Cook and his landing party was a bullet. And very little has changed since then. You look at the recent, 50,000 strong people protesting in Sydney against police brutality, and we were all going to get arrested. So yeah. I'm trying to make the link that, whilst the government's rhetoric and, international corporations and, I think empowering Aboriginal people is really not part of the colonial agenda. And so, with this work, I'm trying to highlight that it was from the very beginning. So, Black Lives Matter, Aboriginal Affairs Matter. Again, it's been happening since 1770. So, whilst the work is simple, I mean, there's so many things that we can unpack from this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, can we delve into the balaclava for a moment, because this is, and we talked about this. We had a really great chat last week. This is not the first time you've used balaclavas in your work to sort of talk about these issues and these sort of these larger narratives. What drew you to that motive as a vehicle for this conversation?
Well, to depict colonization as it was. I mean, they were actually invading thieves. And again, say if the Guigal Shield, for those who don't know what the Guigal Shield is, it's and there is a link. I know I keep coming back to this, but it's all interrelated. So Captain Cook arguably took the first shot. He was the highest ranking officer on the landing party. So it's plausible that he would take the first shot. And that bullet was fired into a Guigal man's shield, went through his shield. And that was the first colonial trophy of conquering with lethal force. For such an uncivilized nation, it's one of Britain's prized possessions in the British Museum. They won't give it back. So again, it's really about intention. And I like to think that with this work, I'm just highlighting truths to basically invoke accountability. Essentially, if I had to sum up my work in this show and, as a thread that sort of runs through my work, I'd have to say accountability.
Yeah, I feel like and I'm, I guess, editorializing a little bit, but the balaclava as a motive in itself is, emblematic of this idea that this is illegal and these were criminal acts, and they were continued to be kind of perpetrated. And so, so often the dominant narrative is portraying Captain Cook and other people who were a part of that as these heroic figures. And you're shining up, in this piece in particular, you're shining a light to expose the crookery and the criminality of that.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Because, a lot of the systemic racism against Aboriginal people, it is largely invisible to either perpetrators or people that profit from it, or and it is invisible because the campaign that has existed since 1770, we still have huge support for celebrating Australia Day on the symbolic day that we were invaded. Now, the fact that we're still having these discussions is just outrageous. The fact that our Prime Minister wants to spend 50 million perpetuating this lie that Australia was legally occupied. I mean, Terra Nullius proves that you know, it wasn't. The premise, the lie, basically, of we invaded uncivilized land. That lie has been carried through today, and basically every major significant Aboriginal challenge has been because of corroborating this lie from the very beginning. So it will turn colonization on its head, which is probably scary for some. So yeah, I use the balaclava. I mean, it's about, you know, it's about hiding what you really are. You know, I find our current government, and probably all governments since 1770, just so pernicious. And you know, anyway, I could talk about that all night.
No, it's great. I think it's like a really hard thing to like marry within ourselves as well. It's like we're kind of born into this society that is like built on this lie, and we have to either choose to go along with it and be happy little citizens of the colonial structure, or try and wear down this stone and get it to a point where we are happy and feel like we are a part of the social structure that, you know, we've changed the social structure for the better that fits us as well. I just want to remind people to pop any questions that they might have for Jason in the Q&A box. We'll continue to chat, and then towards the end of the event, we'll kind of jump through and chat into some of your questions. Should we talk a bit about other statues and statues in general?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I don't know. How about the government commissioning a $50 million Cook veneration? You know, still. I mean, what does that say for the leader of this country? What does that say for the way our country is driven? If that's coming from the top down, still perpetuating these lies, still, you know, it's looking pretty, well, it's embarrassing. It's disastrous. I mean, you know, Scott Morrison is a joke. He does not speak for the people. I'd love to sit at a table with him. You know, if any media could get me at a table sitting next to him, I've got lots of community consultation that, you know, he needs to hear and he needs to be accountable for. And, you know, we have to stop being such compliant sheep. I mean, you know, he gets fired from a marketing campaign about Australia, you know, where the bloody hell are you? You know, and now he's marketing our country to the rest of the world. That's an embarrassment. It's beyond a joke. And so this is where our frustration comes out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, you know, so I can understand the frustration of Aboriginal people and minority groups all around the world, because this police brutality, government sanctioned, you know, this just goes on every day, unaccountable. So it's just not good enough. And there's good momentum. There's really good momentum building, and we have to all contribute, you know, as I said.
Yeah, it is as much our place as artists to contribute to that as anyone else.
Yeah, it's one way, you know, I mean, but through my art, I try and target politicians and people in positions of power and the general public, because, you know, ultimately they're the ones that can really make effective change overnight. We've seen with COVID laws, despite how subjective they are, you know, ScoMo can go to the footy, but the same rules are, you know, they shut down a Black Lives Matter protest while he gloats about not missing out on the footy. You know, it's subjective double standards again. Just got to be accountable.
Yeah, absolutely. Jumping back into statues and like segueing from double standards, and this might be a bad segue. One of the things we chatted about the other day was the Flinders cat statue, and how it might be interesting to me that we're doing a talk on the internet where photos of cats are so celebrated. and we're going to be having a quick chat about a statue of Flinders Cat. But that it's so wild to me that we have this like celebrated statue of this man's cat over in this like in spaces in Australia that are celebrated over Indigenous and First Nations heritage.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know about anyone else, but when I see colonial monuments, I get physically sick. You know, I've even vomited in front of colonial monuments. I mean, I have a physical reaction, and I'm sure a lot of Aboriginal people feel that as well. I mean, you know, you've got a statue, a memorial of Governor Macquarie, who, you know, I mean, yeah, in Hyde Park, and I mean, this was, yeah, there it is. You know, this was commissioned in 2013. So, I mean, we've known about the brutal history of Governor Macquarie being the architect of the government approved assimilation policy and martial law against Aboriginal people. Now, you know, this is akin to a Hitler statue being commissioned in 2013, right? That has the attempted genocide on our people by this guy. And, you know, in a response to this on the other side of the screen, you know, this is an actual quote from Governor Macquarie's orders to his soldiers. Now, take a minute, just let that sink in for a minute. And now go back to the statue. You know, Captain Cook's statue again, etched in stone, discovered this territory, 1770. Now, this is physical erasure. This is social erasure. This is historical myths, truths. You know, the systemic. Sorry?
It's propaganda.
Oh, hard up from day one till now. I mean, they've just changed names, but the same colonial formula is just rolled out again. And you know, with these monuments, you know, I personally feel that every colonial monument should have an equal 1-to-1 ratio. So for every colonial monument and building and design square, there needs to be a 1-to-1 ratio. Now, that's fair, you know, that's equitable. If that doesn't happen, well, yeah, probably we have to look at some other options. You know, there's another option where monuments could be updated. So for instance, you know, the Governor Macquarie's quote there, you know, we could etch that into the back of his statue, just to have dual representation. You know, so trim the cat, the bronze, so just out the front of the State Library. You know, there's Matthew Flinders, huge, massive thing. And behind him, the bronze statue of his cat, Trim, who went on the boat with him around Australia. Now, you know, no mention of Bungaree. You know, has anybody heard of Bungaree? Bungaree was labelled as the first Australian, one of the most significant people to straddle both worlds. He circumnavigated Australia twice with Flinders. Now, why isn't there a bronze memorial of him? Where is it? I mean, even the huge sandstone plinth that Flinders is on, you know, we could etch Bungaree into it just so there's some, it's not ideal, but at the very least, you know, dual representation. I mean, you know, we can bronze a cat for, you know, it's...
Yeah. I mean, there's been this huge conversation around statues recently, and I think like it's a conversation that shouldn't go away, and what we do with them, because I mean, these are artists' works as well.
Sure.
But I mean, they're not Picasso's.
No, but also, I mean, something that the colonial, you know, dominant society doesn't understand is that these monuments are psychically abusive. They are intergenerational abuse, and they are a reminder of every single issue with Aboriginal affairs, when we look at that, it just comes flooding back, and it's celebrated. Cook celebrated, Macquarie celebrated, you know, Bungaree, Trim the Cat celebrated, you know, Bungaree, no one knows about him. So, which is pretty indicative, you know, it's pretty indicative, like there's such a lack of visual Aboriginal presence in Australia, just generally. Tourists come here, they're like, where's all the Aboriginal people and the visual Aboriginal presence? Like,
it seems, I don't really like to kind of look too closely at the sort of monetization of culture in that way, but it is such a like missed opportunity. Like, we are the oldest culture on earth, and we're kind of brought to light when it's a good story and swept under the rug when it's something you don't want to deal with.
Yeah, well, again, you know, non-Aboriginal people, they're fine to profit off our cultural capital, but what return is that coming back into in a genuine, authentic, and ongoing, you know, funding way? I mean, this country's wasted the best asset it has. You know, we celebrate the pyramids, and they're a fraction of these priceless artifacts that Rio Tinto blows up on Sorry Day. And you know, that's just on Sorry Day. This happens every day, every single day, and it has been since 1770.
Yeah, it's not even to talk about the destruction that's happened on the East Coast, because that, I mean, that the piece that Rio Tinto blew up in WA, like, that's only the most recent piece. We've had 230 years of kind of amazing places that have been destroyed because of this like complacency towards people.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, okay, to honor and respect artists who made these works, great. Gather them up. Let's have a little colonial sculpture park around Parliament House, and they can all go around and polish their brass things, and you know, like they belong there. They belong there. These do not belong in the public. These memorials, all of Sydney is a massacre site. Any waterway or Sydney CBD is a massacre site. These monuments are built upon our bones.
Should we chat for a moment about, I mean, we're doing a talk for the State Library now.
Sure.
And we talked about chatting about this. Your work is collected by state institutions. My work is collected by state institutions. And both of our works that have been collected by these places are counterculture works. They are an attack on this idea of colonization, but they're also being collected by you know, colonial structures. Yeah, how do you feel about that?
Well, I think you know, there's something to be said for doing what you want to do, for doing something you believe in. My practice hasn't necessarily been commercial because it's been, I don't know, not sort of pretty abstract flowers or something. You know, it's very hard to hold a mirror up to society and them finding that quite confronting or ugly, and then me going, oh yeah, buy it, you know, look great in your lounge room, like. So, you know, I guess, but I mean, that's artist integrity. I mean, I've never sold a lot of work really, but that's not why I do it. But to be collected in, you know, state institutions, which are largely government funded, you know, I think it's a validation of sorts. It's a validation that these institutions are making an effort to have dual representation. Still a long way to go. I mean, the colonial framework of the art academy and institutions and, you know, the academy. But being validated, I mean, me being shown in the State Library with a work like this, personally, I feel is quite visionary and a very encouraging sign of things to come. And so, you know, as artists, we must give credit to government-funded institutions that do support, and by supporting either purchasing or exhibiting, there are a whole, if my MO is to inform social change, And so state institutions, government institutions, from art exhibitions and artist talks, there's, you know, educational programs, mass media, the dissemination of our story is vast in partnership with organizations. You know, I rely on it as an artist. I need to sell works to pay for the next series. So it supports artists.
I think we have to give like props to the black fellas who have, like, from my perspective, infiltrated these structures and are then, you know, opening the doors for these works to come in and be a part of that collection, because they are validating this our views on the structure.
Yeah, and in one way, we don't need that validation as Aboriginal people, but in another way, it's validating that people are listening and recognizing and actioning, you know, so that's, and supporting. I mean, you know, we're never going to get where we need to get without non-Aboriginal support. I mean, we need it. You know, we've come a long way, still a long way to go. It's still, you know, less than 1% of, you know, coloured curators, leaders. The ratios have kind of remained the same, but it is improving. And, you know, it's kind of exciting. I mean, I never would have thought that my work would end up in the State Library, in you know, challenging the academy in its very home, I guess. But, you know, it's great. It's great.
I mean, that's something that you've actually experienced that really viscerally before with your work that was collected by the New South Wales Parliament.
Well, I mean, they had to acquire it. It was, if they had the option, I don't think they would have. And that was because it was in 3 independent judges. Normally they'd had someone on the board, and normally they were pretty blue chip, passive, dotty work. So I think the fact that in my year, it's important to note that there were 3 independent judges, and it was acquisitive. You know, has my work been seen since then? No, it's probably in the janitor's closet under the staircase. There was one exhibition where they had the winners of each year, and my one was missing. You know, but they should hang it in Parliament House. I made it for Parliament House. It was site specific. It was only supposed to exist there. Why don't they hang it? You know, what are they?
Yeah, it was so powerful, and then like it was on display there for the time while it was as part of that exhibition when it did, in the year that it won, and it was like, you know, a judge staring at them as an artwork. They had to walk past it every time they went to their office. Shall we chat to me about the shield work? We have Audrey Lynn in the Q&A asking about the meaning of the hole in your battleground work.
Yeah, you're just sort of breaking up a little bit. Do you want me to talk about these works?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So gotcha. So yeah, so COVID 1770 on the left. So all of these shields were inspired by the recent Black Lives Matter protest. And I started thinking about, you know, how long we've been protesting for. And so, you know, I made a link between the Guigal Shield, the bullet fired by Captain Cook. And so I argue that is the first protest. And so these shields have bullet holes in them in exactly, it's almost dead center. And COVID 1770 really is to respond to what's happening now and respond to what happened day one of invasion. And, you know, there's a big myth out there that, you know, another sort of PC myth that, you know, Aboriginal people got the common cold and they were all wiped out. You know, that's what we hear. Okay, sure, you know, part of that was true. But what you don't hear is that, you know, the British Empire have been experimenting with with biological warfare for a really long time. It was tried and tested in invading Africa and India, colonizing India and Africa, perfected, and then rolled out here. So, you know, what I thought was really super interesting during COVID was that, you know, I was hoping that this work would inspire a bit of empathy from non-Aboriginal people. Like, you know, now they know what it's like to be feared. Now they know what it's like to be looked at like you're a disease. Now they know what it's like to, you know, be on government benefits, or, you know, now you're experiencing some of the, you know, social discomfort. And so, you know, one, I wanted to alert people that it wasn't the common cold, it was biological warfare. I mean, even my own mob around Taree, we were, you know, 90% of us were wiped out with arsenic poisoning, mixing arsenic in damper and just feeding it to mob. You know, this was very super common. So yeah, so I've done a series of these shields, and you know, here I've got always was, never will be. And, you know, I think if we look at history and if we look at the intention from the very first welcome to country with a bullet, I think it kind of just says it all. You know, we always hear that it's always Aboriginal land, but if we look at the actual reality, it couldn't be further from the truth. So, you know, whilst Aboriginal people, we will always be connected to the land. It will always be our land.
Yeah.
But in terms of how history, if we want to predict the future based on the past, well, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it feels to me like we are trying to claw back some, like, actually claw back some land at every point that we can, because we, like, otherwise we will just be left without ground to walk on.
Well, yeah, I mean, we have to claw back everything, you know, everything that was taken from us from day one. And then we've got the shield next to us, about face. So it's a military term. So really it's a call to arms. So it's about us as mob, just mobbing up and just go, nah, we ain't turning our back on this, you know. Or it's about, you know, the colonial perspective where it's like, actually, we can't admit that we invaded your country and oppressed you from day one. We're not really into that. Doesn't really suit our agenda. We'll just turn around, walk away, unaccountable. Or black fellas hearing about face and then dropping to the ground.
Yeah.
No different to what's happening in remote communities.
Just checking, Jason, you're getting me again?
Yeah, we're back on. Yeah.
Sweet. I had a bit of a thunderstorm above me. It seems to have passed. Can I jump ahead a little bit?
Yeah.
Because there is a work that I want to talk about, or I want to hear about, which is this one. I want to hear all about it because, to me, there's something like hugely mythological and important, but like mythological in that it hits me in here and it hits me like right in my spinal cord, and makes me feel like energized and tingling. So yeah, can you take me through this?
Yeah, sure. So this was part of the Three Views exhibition, curated by John Mundine and John Cheeseman at Mossman Art Gallery. And so myself, Carla Dickens, and Black Douglas, we were given identical, they're like big cannon bunkers. And, you know, I've been working with an ongoing series for a while about Pemulwuy. And for those who don't know who Pemulwuy is, he was one of New South Wales, he was a Bidjigal man, one of New South Wales' greatest resistance warriors. He led a 12-year resistance campaign against the Frontier Wars. And he was eventually, you know, shot and captured. But he could turn into a crow. He was a Godicha man, a clever man, and he had magical power. Anyway, the guy's just absolute legend and gangster. And we were told that, you know, Aboriginal people were so placid little sheep. It's like, nah, nah, that's written out of history. So, and largely the only knowledge we have of Pemulwuy is from colonial documents. You know, the sort of, and it's sand and ochre, and so it was a performative channeling of sorts, but private. I was trying to draw strength from this character, because of you know, we're resisting every day and it's exhausting, and so sometimes we need a little extra boost. And so, you know, I was just trying to form a relationship of sorts, broadly speaking.
Yeah.
And this was the result. And I wanted people to be fearful and mystical and magical, because, you know, that's us, you know.
I'm going to jump over to answer a question in the Q&A. I'll get you to answer a question in the Q&A. Someone asks, what are your ideas about how Bungaree and other Aboriginal figures could be artistically represented in statue form?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, first of all, I think we have to ask ourselves, you know, is a bronze statue, you know, is that the way to go, you know, or is that just one colonial model? You know, I think it's important that, you know, we are portrayed as people. You know, it was only 1967 we were classified as humans, the oldest culture in the world. So it is nice to have representations of our people, but you know, I think we can do more. I think that's just one strand. You know, I think of placemaking in a holistic sense. So we actually, it's all inclusive, but, you know, the developers are, you know, essentially taking land, and once that land's gone, you can't inform it the public space component again. So, you know, whilst I think, you know, representing people is one way to do it, I don't think it's the best. I don't think it's very visionary. I think we should be talking about inviting artists in the planning phase for all buildings, all public space, all development, and all Aboriginal artists as, you know, the least we could do for plundering everything. You know, at least let Aboriginal artists contribute back to a visual Aboriginal presence. And I don't think a bronze statue is going to do that. I don't want anything to do with bronze statues. It just denotes colonial, you know, megalomaniac people like bloody Macquarie. The guy was a attempted genocide maniac. You know, I don't want to see a statue of him. God.
Yeah, and I totally see what you're saying. And one of the things that, like, I want to touch on with this is we have our monuments already, and they're engraved in stone. And there's this, like, current issue around them being degraded by being walked on and erosion, because we're not because, like, that relationship that we had traditionally with them was that we would sit around and tell story and continue that engraving process and continue engraving them over time. So it was a living relationship with that artist and with that art piece, between human and art piece. And so without that continuing relationship happening and that practice happening, we're, like, losing that. And so to, like, just go, well, why would we represent Bungaree or any of our, you know, mob heroes who have come since and before? Why would we represent them in the colonizers' bronze? What would be the point?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I totally agree. I think we can really come up with more innovative and visionary and really exciting more solutions than that. You know, we're in a land war. You know, we really need to get these developers on board. Like, you know, once they take it, they're 100-year leases, and we don't even have access to our rock engravings, like, because of private fences. Or, you know, you've got John Mundine for the last 20 plus years has wanted to put, in consultation with the relevant community, has wanted to engrave the rock engravings right opposite the Opera House. Now, that's a fantastic idea, fantastic location, but he keeps getting knocked back. Oh, maybe it's a bit too visual. Maybe it's a bit too Aboriginal. Maybe it's a bit too visible. I think it's, I think it's too visible, too empowering. I don't know.
Yeah, we don't want that.
Mm.
Should we jump in and talk about these couple of works?
Mm.
And then we'll jump over to the Q&A. Just mindful that we kind of have a time limit.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I'll keep it pretty brief. This one goes out to ScoMo, who apparently Foundation of Australia wasn't based on slavery of Indigenous people, although he makes comments of he refers to blackbirding in other speeches, and it's not that he's ignorant, he just doesn't suit his agenda. But that's a separate issue. So I've stenciled tobacco on the wall, and I found these artifacts. So this is part of an exhibition. The context is super important. So this was a work I made at the Glasshouse Gallery in Port Macquarie, and this is for the anniversary of Governor Macquarie. And so I found these artifacts in the basement of the art gallery. And so I called the show Presence of Absence. And essentially the conceptual framework was I had to show a history of the erasure of Aboriginal culture by only using colonial artifacts, because there were no Aboriginal artifacts found. So that's the premise of the show. And so this shows intergenerational slavery, the modern form, tobacco, modern form of slavery, rum, alcohol, and we're under no illusions that we're still slaves today. And this was introduced by the colony, by the way, and yet we're demonized and stereotyped that we can't look after ourselves.
I might jump to the next one.
Yeah. This is one of my personal favorites. You might have to stand back from the screen a little bit just to sort of see it. But it says white bread. And so this is about my mob, Biripi mob, about our family basically being wiped out. So arsenic was a common ingredient on pastoral, because you have to dip sheep's feed and you don't get foot rot and stuff. And so anyway, they just basically mix arsenic in damper, poison water holes with arsenic. Now, arsenic poisoning is one of the most horrific ways to go. Depending on the dosage, could take an hour, could take a week, could take a month. And so I stamped the arsenic symbol into toast, and so it's like a toast stamper. And, it's a comment on the chemicals in our food today. Back in the day, we had things like kangaroo grass. These are gluten-free, natural pesticides. They never need insecticides, amongst a whole bunch of other things. So yeah, comment, it's like chemicals in our food today, and about, well, I don't know, attempted genocide of my mob.
I mean, I don't want to jump in too much and chat over the top of you on that one. Because I mean, it's a personal piece, but also it's large as well.
Yeah, this happened all around Australia, not just Taree. Yeah.
Are you happy for me to jump into some of the questions in the Q&A?
Yeah, sure.
Anyone else has any, please pop them in now, and we'll try and get to all of them. If we can't, very sorry. Okay, and some of they're going to be very broad and some be very targeted. How important is the role of art, specifically in truth-telling and shifting perceptions for you?
I feel art is it's critical. It's always been an agent and a vehicle for social change. It's not the answer. We still need politicians to change racist policies, particularly like our current government's ones. it's very critical, but our voice is limited. You know, our voice is limited to galleries, to media, and whilst they are really great things, but we just do not have the reach. You know, we can, you know, my role is to archive artworks for future generations to make the, you know, to make people accountable, government essentially, and all of its followers, racist ones, I mean. So yeah, it's really important, but we need help. We need politicians. We need lawyers. Every skill that someone has benefited off because of oppressing our culture. You know, you need to return your gifts in an equal exchange to make this right. You know.
I think we were talking the other day about how Aboriginal artists and First Nation artists have started to use social media really powerfully as a tool for this, and to truth tell and to use as an archive, but also as a really powerful tool to like almost circumvent that need for politicians, because and not to incite violence, but you know, if we wait for politicians to do everything, nothing will get done. Like, we need to sometimes force that change, which we are seeing across the world with the Black Lives Matter movements. We're participating in that. Okay, I'm going to jump in for another one. To me, can the blue balaclava on Cook be interpreted as the blueprint for the invasion of Aboriginal people?
Yes, and they get top marks, whoever that is. Yes, that is definitely part of it. I'm actually making an artist book for the Australian Design Centre at the moment, and it's out of blueprint paper. So that refers to that, the architects who designed colonization from before the Roman Empire up until its perfected version that we experience. You know, so there is this sort of architect blueprint vibe about it. There's also a very clinical part of it too. There's the light that reveals the hidden, you know, like the blood spatter. You know, it's things that we as Aboriginal people see with our dual lens of everything, but not everyone's privy to that. So yes, it's definitely part of this blueprint, architect, forensics. You know, you do a little bit of digging, you know, follow the money. Yeah, that's definitely part of it.
Jason, I'm going to gush for a minute, but like, you like big brain, man. Like, if there's so many layers that I feel like are in your works, that as you keep like pulling them apart as an audience member, I feel like you've been thinking about them in the conception part of before you started making this work.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting. I mean, a lot of my work is just really intuitive. I mean, and it's different every time. I mean, yeah, the other part of it is that this is just daily life. I mean, we review it on the daily. Unfortunately, I wish that wasn't the case. But yeah, I mean, look, these are important issues that are not really often being discussed, and if they are, you know, they're not reaching the right people. And if they're not, or if it does reach the right people and they don't do anything about it, well, that's another story again.
Someone asks, you mentioned accountability, and having seen this work, I loved how it forces the visitor to be directly responsible for which cook they see. Was this interactivity intended to reflect a sense of accountability?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it definitely was. For those who haven't seen the work, there's a proximity sensor. And so there's a measured distance. I call it an uncomfortable space, and we all have our own limits to that socially. But it's measured just enough that when you breach that uncomfortable space, so viewing the work from a distance, it's a could easily be mistaken as a celebration of Cook. But the curiosity for someone to want to engage, it's taking the first step. And then a little closer. When we look at things a little closer, then comes the reward. When you have a critical mind and you're not a colonial sheep, you start to see rewards. And so, yeah, but also, someone might engage with that and not like it, and they have the choice to walk away or not engage, or so, it's without sounding like, too preachy, like everyone's got to be accountable. But I find that, with art, there's a really great tool where we can physically moving somebody or trying to, in a kind of inception kind of way, to tap into empathy and emotional triggers to hopefully, rewrite some connections or, how do you reach people? It's like every time we mention anything Black affairs, it seems to be this big wall. So as artists, we have to kind of learn how to bypass that, to be informative without being, offending white sensibilities, which is difficult.
Yeah, I think one of the really interesting things that you've done with that work is you actually put the power of choice to the viewer. And as they walk closer to look, that's when the light comes on, but then they have the choice to move back away and not be confronted with that, or they can step closer and continue to delve into that, sort of sunlight is the best medicine, put sunlight and bring it out for the world to see, and let's actually have that conversation.
Yeah, and let's archive it. Just to get back to institutions. These are all archived. Our really famous artistic protests throughout history. It's like when people see these compiled, and we're just like, oh my God, we've been protesting the same thing since day one. Like you do the math, it's not adding up. So. If anything, the archive is super important. We all have broadcast, television networks in our pocket. And the biggest users of social media are women, who are a minority group, and minority groups. So they're the biggest users, consumers and users of social media. So this has gained momentum. We're mobilizing, we're connecting, we're sharing information. The fact that we can film misconduct by police and politicians, forces their hand to respond, So we have to look at, are we effective on the street? Yes, always. But are we equally as effective with placing pressure on mainstream media by forcing them via social media, or presenting two different accounts, you look at all the video footage from the Sunrise protest in Martin Place years ago. They live edited an Aboriginal protest.
Yeah,
live. And because we had social media streaming live, they got caught out, and now they breached, the broadcasting code of conduct because of people power. We made a change that day.
I might jump back in, and I'm going to editorialize this question a little bit. They ask, is the imagery in your art a way of healing and action? I'm going to editorialize it and say, because you mentioned how statues and colonial statues are a psychic attack, and you feel, physically ill from it. Do you seek to use that same kind of psychic attack in some of your work, or do you use the imagery as a way of healing and action, or both?
Yeah. No, I don't feel like I return that psychic attack. I mean, that's just not a space for me, and they can sort of have that. I'd like to think that my work was about healing. I mean, as artists, we have our own healing. Like, say, for instance, last night I hand drew a map about that big of Australia with all 350 plus mobs. Now, that took me hours to draw. And every time I draw around a boundary of a completely covered Australia, you know, that takes you somewhere. You know, when you think about, you know, what's happened. So we do go on journeys, and you know, I mean, I've made work when my, you know, family had passed, and you know, so there are cathartic ways, and I hope that my work heals, and people generally. If somebody gets that from my work, great. I do have a little bit of healing through the process in my own private way, but I don't really, you know, I don't feel healed by my work. It's very difficult to find the joy and healing and positive Aboriginal stories. Yeah, they're out there, but in stark contrast, I don't know, if you get healing from my work, great. I probably should just leave it at that.
No, I think it's an interesting conversation, because I think, like, as soon as we delve as artists, we're, you know, naturally empathetic, and so as soon as we're diving into these kind of themes, where we're bringing all of that kind of trauma on ourselves again and having to explore it. A follow-up to that question, Dakota Farah asks, one, it says, is healing a part of your work? If so, how do you balance your own healing alongside your dedication of energy towards invoking colonizer accountability? Because I know that colonizer accountability is a key part of your kind of the themes of your work. But how do you kind of, what do you do to unwind?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, you know, I mean, personal, cultural, and spiritual health is super important. Some Aboriginal people, including myself, could have the luxury of that. You know, other families don't even have that luxury. Yeah, I guess, I don't know. I mean, I get a lot of satisfaction knowing that, you know, if I make some work with the intention of getting it some media to spread it further, to put pressure on right people, I mean, I feel healed, I guess, knowing that
you've made a difference.
Yeah, knowing I'm yeah, or at least contributed to, like, made some noise, or at least, you know, I've been forever trying to get a seat at the table with ScoMo. You know, I don't know what he's afraid of.
Maybe someone in the audience has that line. Hopefully. Yeah.
Well, I'm just a mere artist. I don't know why he'd refuse. But anyway, but the healing's important. I've never actually really thought about it, to be honest. I guess I guess I get some sort of healing knowing that I'm contributing to it, or even with my studies, you know, I'm archiving something for future generations to build upon, or healed in the way that I might have an encounter with someone and they might say something to me, and that I might just go, oh, wow, you know, great. So I'm sure there is out there, but I don't know, walking, bike riding, it's really hard to switch off with Black politics because it's everywhere you look. And at times it can really get you down. But our community is strong. So, you know, that's where our community and people like Pemulwuy, and, you know, we have lots of resources. We've survived 100,000 years plus. So, and only through community support. And that extends to the Aboriginal families and supporters in solidarity too. So I think if we went closer to the old ways, you know, the matriarchs, the sharing of knowledge, the sharing of everything, not capitalist ego corporation.
Yeah, Jason, thank you so much. I think that might be a great place to sort of leave it there. I'll ask one more question, and that is, what's next? Where are you going? Where are you going from here?
Who knows?
Is there anything that you can share with us about like coming work other than the book?
Yeah, well, I mean, I just had a really successful show at Arterial Gallery in Roselle. They have really great resources online for kids, and it's just, anyway, check that out. I've just delivered a huge public artwork in Parramatta, close to Parramatta Wharf, in consultation with local Darug elders there. And that's huge. They're 6 large-scale Ngawi canoes made out of steel, and they're all along the Parramatta River there. So that's really great because, you know, I get to name Darug land, which is, you know, is a bit of a shifting sands at the moment. And, you know, I mean, that is very satisfying. You know, I felt healed with that one, actually. I'm like, I've just taken a little snapshot of what was with contemporary, with now, and it's all married, and it's all, you know, it doesn't happen often that you pat yourself on the back, but with this particular one, I'm feeling pretty proud of, I must say. And then little artist book, a little COVID artist book for Australian Design Centre, which is great. That was really great just to get back into drawing, like lo-fi analog, like, whoa. So that was really interesting process. Murals, I don't know. I'm trying to get like every artist out there, we're just trying to hustle. You know,
if people want to find your work, where is the best place to kind of get some access to it?
Yeah, I'm actually updating my webpage at the moment, which is down, but that will be up and running. But I guess probably the best thing is go to Arterial Gallery. You know, they can help out, or, you know, you can write direct to me as well, and that's I don't know, Jason Wing at Gmail. Jason Wing 1 at gmail.com.
The other Jason Wing is getting, people are sending him emails right now.
Oh yeah, actually not everyone, just supporters, thanks. I don't have time for the others. You know, we've been telling you from the start, it's too late now. Yeah.
Jason, thank you so much. Marika, do you want to come back in just quickly?
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add?
Oh, just, yeah, I just want to join Travis in thanking you, Jason. It was an absolute delight for me. You're just so refreshing in your honesty and frankness, and it was really insightful to hear from you also about your recent work, including Captain James Crook, which we're really proud to have in the 8 Days in Kamay exhibition, and so grateful that you could join us this evening. So thank you so much.
Thanks you guys. Yeah, no, I'm an equal fangirl to both of you, and it's yeah, I guess you know, this is a really great, you know, sign of things to come, and
yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Ongoing, you know, financial support for the arts by the government, you know, allows shows like this to happen. But it's got to be ongoing. It's got to be significant, and it's got to be, you know.
And anyway. I would encourage anyone who's in Sydney and able to visit the exhibition safely to please do so. Now that you've heard all about the work, I definitely would encourage you to see it in person, because as good as it is online, it's better in person. And it's really fun to think differently about Cook and interact with Cook in a way that some people perhaps haven't done before, or perhaps allowed themselves to do before. Yeah, and so if this series, I should say as well, if this series has stirred up something in you and you want to do a deeper dive into this, the Library's 8 Days in Kamay exhibition and also Bumali's Not Young or Free exhibition both thoroughly explore the themes that have cropped up in this series. So please do check them out. They're both online if you're not in Sydney. And I'd also just like to take a moment to say a special thank you to you, Travis.
Yes, thanks, Travis.
Host. And it has absolutely made this series what it is. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I agree.
And the depth. He's good, isn't he? He's damn
He's good. So much love in the room. So much love. I love it.
I'm blushing. Thank you so much. I was going to do a thank you. Thank you to the State Library. Jason, thank you for being a part of the last session. Again, like totally fanboying.
Same.
And thank you to everyone at the State Library, Marika, Jade, for working really hard to make these as good as they have been. I've had an amazing time, and we'll hopefully be back at some point and see. And a huge thank you to our audience, our internet audience.
Of course, yes.
Joining us every fortnight, because it's been really special, and I can't wait to see you all again.
Yeah, I can just imagine people chopping their carrots, and I'm like, the bloody government.
Well, I think that's it.
Anyway, thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jason and Trav, and thanks everyone for joining us. Yeah, keep your eyes peeled for future Talking Deadly online events. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.